All right, people, are we ready to do this thing?
Ready.
Yes.
Not gonna miss my shot.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this thing. Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Geek Fanthology. I am your host, Neil Cordray, and I'm joined this week by
The one true Ben.
Mike.
and special guest stars. Kevin, we can't hear you. Did you mute your microphone?
I did not.
Huh.
Oh, there you are.
Try it again.
And I'm Becca.
Okay. So yes, Kevin and Becca, because I didn't actually hear Kevin say it again, but whatever.
You hear me
These
now?
two, yes.
Perfect.
Don't know what happened there. Ben, we're picking up a lot of ambient noise from you. How dare you have better internet that transmits all the white noise?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, all I got right now is crickets. I can close the window.
That might help. I think it's the crickets that are picking up.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I mean, you sound like you're.
You sound like you're in the bathroom,
in the
but yes, we can
bathroom,
hear you.
I'm across the room.
All
Recording
right.
from the bathroom frowned upon because I need to switch rooms then.
You'll fit in well here.
It's got a logical humor.
So we're about a month behind on jumping on this particular hype train, but such it is with scheduling and the like. We're going to talk about Hamilton, the musical, an American musical, is it? I think is the official subtitle of it.
That's correct.
And how it was recently released on Disney Plus for pretty much everyone to see. Before we do that, though, standard rules apply. We have signal boosts. I usually like to actually come up last on that. So, Ben, you got anything?
Yes, and actually, I have to thank Becca for this one.
Oh no.
It's a group
What are
called
you?
the Stupendium. Yes, I'm blaming you, Becca. It's a group called the Stupendium on YouTube. They do music videos to games. My favorite one is The Fine Print, which is a YouTube video for the Outer Worlds.
I have found them. There will be a link in the doobly-doo.
Okay, thank you. So I will allow that. I will leave that to you then, sir. And you're
Kevin?
very capable.
Or not, Kevin. Mike, do you have anything?
Yeah. I've been playing Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition on the Switch with Lacey, and that's been a lot of fun. For people that, well, you probably heard of the game if you're familiar with the franchise, but anyway, there's a Dynasty Warriors franchise that's been, it's gone back like a long time. There's been like 8 of those games or something, 7 or 8 of them.
Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme on the PS2 was my jam.
I guess it depends on whether you count. It's kind of like iPhones, right? Where you have like the iPhone 4, the iPhone 4S, the iPhone 5, the iPhone 5S. There's always this like transitional one that's like, it's like the most recent iteration, but with more stuff. But wait, there's more. And they come out with like an XL version. Anyway, basically, for those not familiar, Dynasty Warriors is a game where you're like on the field of battle and you're actually doing like, it's like you have like a war going on, but you're actually in the field just like as an action beat 'em up kind of thing where you're laying waste to these armies, and you have like hero units that you're using control of to like take over like keeps and outposts and whatever, and it's a whole thing. But Hyrule Warriors is that, but instead of the dynasties that at least loosely based on actual historical people, it's set in the Zeldaverse in Hyrule, and you've got Link and Zelda and all these other like supporting characters, and you can play as a lot of the villains too, Ganondorf and others, and it's just a lot of fun, and been unlocking the various weapons and stuff, and it's got a lot of different gameplay modes, and pretty much all of them have co-op in it. So
did they fix the FPS issues for co-op mode? Because I know that was a big problem when it was on the Wii U.
Supposedly, because I haven't noticed any.
Excellent.
But basically, it's called Definitive Edition because much in the tradition of, hey, the same game but more. They had for the Wii U, they had Hyrule Warriors, the original release, and then for the Switch, it's basically like a polished port of the original game plus all the like expansion DLC stuff or whatever, all in one shiny little package.
Including Linkle.
Yes, Linkle, which is actually one of my favorite warriors to play as, because you can kick butt from a distance, and it's a lot safer that way. and she's got the whole dual crossbow, like Demon Hunter from Diablo 3 style thing going on. It's pretty cool.
For those who aren't aware, Linkle is the Rule 63 version of Link.
What's Rule 63?
Rule 63 is if a character exists, there is a gender swapped version of that character that exists.
Ah, but like in the game, it's presented as like basically like somebody it's like if a cosplayer suddenly became actually like powered. Like she's like, I don't know if it's necessarily Link specifically, but she's like a Hero of Time fangirl. And so she donned the garb or whatever from Legend, and so she's like basically in a Link outfit, and she's like willed herself into becoming this heroic, powerful warrior. And yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, another fun little thing is if you use the strong attack and you run out of the like power meter or whatever, and you hit it, she'll do this thing where she just like lifts one of her crossbows up into the air and goes da na na na. It's adorable.
Excellent. Kevin, you have anything?
Mine's a little smaller and maybe a little outside the wheelhouse that you guys have been talking about, but
we did an episode where we talked about bushcrafting, so go for it, bro.
Okay, well, I've become obsessed with the album's several months old, but from the new Nightwish album, the last song on there is called Endlessness, and that song I've just been obsessed with this last week or so. Just the beat, the guitar riffs, it doesn't have Floor singing in this one. It's got Marco singing, and he does just a phenomenal job on it. Just the way he sings the song, and just kind of like the theme. It's like the theme is like it's from the perspective of the universe. The vocals are from the perspective of the universe, like just eternal and endless, hence the name Endlessness. But it's just a wonderful song, and I recommend if you're all into operatic or melodic metal at all, checking it out.
Link will be in the doobly-doo as well as the green room of our community Discord that nobody is a part of. But hey, you could join. Check it out on our Facebook page. Becca, do you have anything?
Not really. Most of what I've been really into this week has been playing Bendy and the Ink Machine, because
that's worth shouting out. It was a really cool little indie game. I haven't played it, but I've watched a couple Let's Plays. And
so one of the cool things about it is once you beat it, you get a super secret decoder ring.
Mm-hmm.
You can play the game again, looking for secret messages hidden throughout the game.
Nice.
And that's not fair for me.
I like games with replay value, even when they're like short little episodic things like Bendy.
Drink Ovaltine.
Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. Yes. So I've got 3 things to briefly shout out / mention on my end. First, a brief thing in follow-up to our very special episode about mental health. I am currently taking anti-anxiety medication because sometimes you need some help. If you can't make your own neurotransmitters, store-bought is fine. It is not a sign of weakness to take medication. It is a sign that you are willing to do what is necessary to deal with your illness. It's like any other illness. If you get an infection, you need to take your antibiotics. If you can't deal with your mental illness, then medication is potentially the way to go. Talk to your doctor, obviously, but and what I'm on has been really helping me. I haven't been nearly so I haven't been so tense. My resting heart rate's down by like 5 beats per minute. Neil is pretty happy, and I'm not sure whether that's just because I've had a good week or because I'm on the meds, but I'll take either.
Maybe the two feed into each other.
It is possible.
So, of course, this, not go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, it's just like, I'll take whatever I can get. If I start having bad times, then, I'll talk to my therapist about it, because I've got a therapist now too. So, that's one thing. 2, just a brief reiteration of something I think I probably said 2 years ago. The Spider-Man game on PS4 is really freaking great. I recently picked up the DLC for it and have been replaying it, and it's just fantastic. And my standard, I try to find something interesting to shout out on YouTube. The YouTuber that I want to highlight this time is Daniel Thrasher. He does piano-based sketch comedy. which is funnier than it sounds. Very short form videos, like 2 to 3 minutes apiece. Link will be in the doobly-doo. Obviously, for anything that we recommend, please comment in their comment section that we sent you, because that helps to build buzz for us. Yes, I know it's kind of but hey, anything helps.
Don't forget to hit subscribe and like.
Yeah, on our stuff too. I need to start uploading to YouTube again. So, if we're going to talk about Hamilton, then there's a very obvious spoiler of the week that would need to be given.
Spoiler.
And that is, spoiler of the fortnight, yes. I will still call it spoiler of the week, even though we don't record weekly anymore. Just because I can't break the habit. And that is, Aaron Burr shoots Alexander Hamilton.
No way.
Yes, I know, right?
Bum bum bum.
I'm just gonna turn it off now. No point finishing.
Yeah, and now we know how it ends. Damn it! But Aaron Burr is the only sitting vice president that killed someone in a duel that we are aware of.
Fun fact.
So, Hamilton, an American musical. It is in. Oh shoot! There was one other thing. One other piece of news that I ran across that I wanted to share. Apparently,
you missed your chance.
yeah, no, I'll come back to it. Then we'll get to Hamilton. Apparently, the Mandalorian season 2 is going to be coming out in October of this year.
Yes, I saw that today.
Yeah, that news just broke. So hooray! More Mandalorian coming soon. That's really kind of about it. But now to Hamilton. So being of the theater perspective, of the I'm an old theater guy at this point. From been doing it for 14 years. Initially. That is a fair amount of experience, Ben. Sure,
So-
we're not all 80 like you and have had 20,000 jobs, but
I was gonna say, is this where we put in insert Neil is old joke?
Your turn.
That's why you use the word experienced instead of old.
yeah,
You can
because
avoid that conundrum.
that is the thing. Like, I've been doing theater for about 15 years because I've been doing it since I was 16. I'm only 31. I'm not 1,000 years old like Ben. That's a proper response, I think.
Not gonna add that one.
That banter reflux.
Yes. But I have a very knee-jerk reaction to Broadway musical that wins all the Tony Awards, which is usually it's usually, man, this thing's going to be overrated. This thing's going to be overrated to all get out, because so many of them have been.
Right.
I was going to say Wicked springs to mind. It's an overrated musical, but man, did it win all the Tonys. I'm also not too particularly fond of Book of Mormon, which some people will say is heresy, in more ways than one.
There's some
Mormon is
irony.
amazing.
Certainly a lot of levels of irony there. By the way, how
Yeah.
confusing would the Jersey reviews of Wicked be? Like, yo, this Wicked show is wicked good. It's like a Who's on First routine.
Thank you. He'll be here all week.
All fortnight.
But matters of taste aside, I have found that frequently, in my opinion, the Broadway musical, what wins all the awards, is overblown and overhyped and very dismissible / forgettable. Hamilton is one of the few musicals that I have seen that I feel actually lives up to and deserves every bit of hype it has gotten.
We will need to have an argument about this later, Neil.
Okay. You don't think Hamilton deserves its hype?
No, we're gonna talk about other musicals that won a lot of awards that so totally deserve their hype, just like Hamilton.
Okay, fair enough. We can do that. But
So not all musicals.
yes. Hashtag not all musicals. But so like from my pseudo hipster-ish point of view, which I admit is probably a lot of that is I started just not even caring about musicals that won all the awards because I got burned too much by it when I was in high school.
You've been hurt before.
Yeah, but Hamilton's freaking great. That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah. Well, see, Hamilton is Hamilton, I would say, is not so much a Broadway musical; it's a freaking rap opera.
Well, technically speaking, it is an operetta, which is to say, which is what?
Technically speaking, there's no technically speaking about it.
Well, it's not an opera because it's not Italian.
Here we go. This is the part where I talk about how your champagne isn't really champagne because it's not from the Champagne region of France and all that bullshit. Well, here, from an outsider perspective here, in the sense of not being someone who's done theater. As far as I'm concerned, it's a musical and it was performed on Broadway. Therefore, it is a Broadway musical. We have
it's
to define
definitely a
terms.
musical.
Like if you're saying Broadway musical as in what is traditionally considered a Broadway musical, or what most Broadway musicals are or were, that's a completely different thing than just like a popular musical that was done on Broadway.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I won't disagree with you, Mike. I won't disagree with you, Mike, because it is a Broadway musical, but.
Yes.
I think it transcends what most Broadway musicals are and becomes a rap opera because it transcends what most musicals are to begin with.
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying I wasn't saying it was not a rap opera. I was saying two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
It is a Broadway musical and it is also a rap opera.
In this situation, it's one of those things where all squares are rectangles, where all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
Yes, or I guess I never get tired of saying this, so let me throw this out there. This is my douchebag and pickup truck theory, which is if you drive a pickup truck, you're not necessarily a douchebag. You might be a great guy, but if you're a douchebag, there's a really good chance you drive a pickup truck. That's a more fun version of rectangles and squares.
Right.
What makes it more of an opera than a Broadway musical is the fact that there is very little dialogue.
There is essentially none.
Right.
And really, actually, the differentiation between an opera and an operetta is length more than anything else. Mostly, the main reason I would call this an operetta is because because it exists in 2 acts as opposed to 5. If you want to get super technical, I threw out the whole it's not Italian, but anyone who's listened to Wagner would say that that's opera too, and that's all in German. So
it's in German. So, but yeah, I mean, and truth is, Neil, if you took Hamilton and slowed it down to normal speaking speed, it would be 4 hours long.
That is one of the more commonly bandied about pieces of statistic on it, which I think is quite interesting and is it's worth noting. But even then, still, it would still only be in 2 acts. It would just be 2 very long acts.
Right.
Yeah. Each act would have its own separate intermission.
Yeah. By the way, I really feel like Act 1 should have stopped with the Battle of Lexington. Like that should have been Yorktown, sorry, not Lexington. Yeah, it should have ended that should have been the intermission break. I think it is a stronger I really feel that it is a stronger end of act go to intermission song than History Has Its Eyes on You. Yeah.
Then what?
Nonstop. Yeah.
Nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
So Nonstop is essential in being the last song in Act 1 because you have to ramp up to Hamilton having his career. So
right.
And besides, let's never forget the amazing start of Act 2 with the introduction of Jefferson. So
that was going to be my point.
What I Miss is fantastic.
You can't end with Yorktown without taking away from the amazing start of Act 2 with What Did I Miss, which is, I think, a stronger beginning than Yorktown would have been a stronger ending, in my opinion.
Okay, that's fair.
And the thing is that with Lynn Manuel-Miranda, I mean, he's a great presence on stage. But David, and I can't remember his last name.
David Diggs.
Yes. I mean,
good job.
Yeah, David Diggs. He completely dominates the stage when Lynn Manuel-Miranda is not on, and when they're both on, it's like a battle of the Titans.
Well, honestly, Lynn Manuel-Miranda's probably one of the weaker singers in the show.
He's the weakest singer. He's a terrible vocalist.
He is absolute. Lynn Manuel-Miranda is a fantastic lyricist and writer, and he's an okay rapper, and he can carry a tune in a bucket. But
His voice wasn't made for singing.
No, it really wasn't.
No.
And but the thing that my wife likes to point out has pointed out to me in the past, even though he's not a great vocalist, he's still very good at conveying emotion in his voice, which
Yeah.
not every good vocalist is good at. And that's his strength in this musical, is that even when he's technically not a good singer, I mean very much so, that's very much on point in the song "Dear Theodosia" when Leslie Odom Jr. stops singing and it goes into Lynn Manuel-Miranda singing, and it's like this huge juxtaposition of amazing vocalist to what the crap is this? But Lynn Manuel-Miranda brings a very good strength in that he can convey the emotion in his voice better than I think anybody else on the stage.
Well, I think
Although
a good point is because the whole thing is kind of because there's hardly any dialogue, but there's still parts that are less like like when there's interstitial stuff going on. Like he gets away with it to an extent because it becomes like an expository thing. Like maybe not in the big song numbers per se, but like because it's a little more murky, like it's not as jarring because it's not like you have somebody who like is part of the main cast in a traditional musical where it's just like dialogue and then break into song where it's like, oh man, this person isn't nearly as good of a singer. Like when everything's kind of sung, it's not as big of a difference.
Yeah. And one other, sorry, go ahead, Becca. You've been talked over like 3 times now.
It's okay. The other thing is that we're also looking at a live performance. And most times live performances get a lot more forgiveness than what we're used to, especially if you don't really go to live performances often. Because like if you look at Lin Manuel Miranda's work on the soundtrack or even his work on like Mary Poppins Returns, he's a very strong vocalist in that because that's a movie format and he's able to get a recording in, and that's what we're used to hearing versus a live musical version, which a lot of us are not used to consuming.
Yeah, but even in the live performance, Leslie Odom Jr. and Daveed Diggs just completely eat his lunch.
Oh, they all do. I mean, I don't think he's, like I said, even in the recording, he's still the weakest vocalist on the track or on the album.
Like, don't get me wrong. When I say he's a subpar vocalist, he'll still kick the hell out of me.
Yes, true.
And anyone else in this Discord.
Right. Oh, I've heard Becca sing. She might give him a run for her money.
Just by comparison to all these fantastic vocalists that he happens to be singing against, and there are many absolutely fantastic vocalists on this.
That's the thing too, is that it's such a high bar that when you're the worst of that bunch, like it's still pretty good.
Right. It's like you're the worst
Iron
player,
Fist good,
but you're still the best. You're still an NFL player.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You're the last of your medical school class, but you're still a doctor. So
yeah, Lin Manuel-Miranda is Iron Fist good when it comes to singing. Which I mean, which I think is one of my favorite things that we've ever coined.
Oh yeah, Iron Fist good is fantastic. Didn't Ben come up with that?
I do believe that was you, Ben. Yes.
I'll take credit.
It's great.
For anyone who hasn't listened to our episodes on the MCU from like 3 years ago, Iron Fist Good is in reference to the Netflix original series for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Jessica Jones. Iron Fist was easily the weakest of them, but it was still pretty good, just when you compare them to what were really, really good Netflix series, it kind of didn't measure up as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other thing I really want to mention that I particularly like about this show is that I don't know if you've ever noticed this just looking at Lin Manuel-Miranda, but he perpetually looks sleep deprived, and that really works well for Hamilton.
This is Vince Vaughn, Susan Sarandon syndrome all over again.
Even like when he's just posting crap on his Twitter, he looks like he hasn't had a good night's sleep in like 3 years.
It really
also suffered from this syndrome, so
he hasn't had a good night's sleep since In the Heights came out.
Yeah.
He's been frantically writing his own stuff.
Yeah.
Writing like he's running out of time.
I mean, let's talk about how great his soundtrack to Moana was. I mean,
yeah,
that's fair.
He's done amazing stuff since Hamilton, even.
Yeah, and In the Heights was really good too. So
He didn't write that though. He was in it though, right?
No, he wrote
I'm
that.
pretty sure he
Oh, he wrote
wrote
that.
it
I didn't-
too. Yeah.
Because
My-
that's the whole story behind Hamilton, is that he was taking a break
Uh-huh.
after his show came off stage. And so he was going out with his family, and he picked up what he thought was the most boring book he could find, so that way he could kind of just forget everything. And it was a biography on Alexander Hamilton.
Which I've read, the Turnout biography.
Because, come on, what could be more boring?
He was our
Anything.
first Secretary of the Treasury, and money's boring, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Oh yeah,
kind of.
I'd heard that story too. That and then he was like completely engrossed with it, with Hamilton
Yeah.
as a person. I mean, this underrated founder.
That was what he said when he debuted the first. He said that when he debuted the opening track at the White House, when he said, "This is just an idea I've kind of got kicking around in my head. Here's why." And he did like the first thing just by himself, just the opening Alexander Hamilton, at some White House event. I can't remember what it was, because Barack Obama was a fan of his.
That's fair.
Which is a
Which is
very.
not surprising.
Although one other great thing I found out about Miranda here is he is a gigantic, huge Weird Al fan, and
Yes.
apparently got semi starstruck when he got a chance to be on the same late night show as Weird Al at one point.
That's
Just
great.
completely geeked out.
Awesome.
So this was I knew you knew this was coming. Favorite songs or favorite songs or songs if you can't really pick one. Ben,
All right.
what do you think?
All right. So I have two very different.
Okay.
So one is King George's "You'll Be Back."
Of course, that's an amazing song.
It is fantastic.
You know, I mean, it's the one song that I can sing. You know, when but it's just I'll send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. And just like
That made my annual July 4th Facebook post.
right. And I like that it's broken up into three parts, but it always comes across consistently as a breakup song.
Oh yeah, no, he's totally the deranged ex-boyfriend who is
Yeah.
stalking.
That's also a historical reference to the Mad King George.
Yeah,
Yes.
because he went completely insane because I think it was syphilis.
Yeah, something like that.
So I mean that's one. I mean that just as a catchy tune that I just I love. And and delivery and everything is perfect. Because it's the whitest guy on stage too. I mean he comes off as the most English person I have in the entire thing. But then for sheer emotional range, it's basically helpless through satisfied.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm really big on Dissatisfied as well.
Yeah, because I mean, the reason I love this, and this is the reason I like the Disney version compared to what I would probably have seen in the live version, is because you can get different camera angles, and it can make that already powerful choreography when
Yes.
she goes backwards and rewinds, and they do the
Yes.
exact same thing completely in reverse.
My wife was
Yeah.
just talking about how amazing that choreography is in that song earlier today.
And just that whole thing. And then there are that reverbs throughout the play. I know my sister's mind like my own mind.
That's one of my favorite musical phrases in a while. The way that goes up and down, like from the tones. And I won't try to sing it because I don't have that kind of range. But I'm a low baritone, so
right.
not an alto.
Hit me hard enough in the right places, I can hit a soprano, but not for long.
I was gonna say an alto. That's not an alto line.
That's totally alto. My mom can sing that, and she's an alto.
But so the thing I like about
We're gonna have to have a fight later, Becca.
Yes.
Okay, so the thing I like about and each of those there's things I like of it. So in "You'll Be Back," George changes, like when he first comes out, he's got all that regalia, and stuff like that. And he does that little mincing walk. And then when he comes out the second time, it's a little more, casual. And then the third time, he's actually, almost like he's in the set, watching what's going on.
Have you heard the story behind that walk?
Yeah, because the crown was
crown and cape were so damn heavy, and he was afraid that he was going to trip and break them.
Yeah, he'll fall over. Yeah.
And it also blows my mind when you're like, King George also sang the reindeer song in Frozen.
So I like how
Get you a man who can do both.
I like how George evolves or devolves as it goes along. With Helpless and Satisfied, like I said, that whole thing where everything goes backwards, and they do it in such a way that you almost don't see it until you see it, and you're going, holy crap, this is where we are. And that leans into another thing throughout the play. When anything that is going forward, the outer circle of the stage rotator always turns in the same direction, clockwise.
And when it's going backwards in Satisfied, it rotates Widdershins.
Yep, goes counterclockwise. Yep,
Widdershins is more fun to say.
This is true. So yeah, that's my two favorites.
Okay.
So yeah, because those are the two. One is the one I can sing the most, and the other is the one that has the most emotional impact.
Mike, your turn.
Yeah. For me, it's hard to really pick a favorite per se. And give a few that stood out. I hadn't really thought about You'll Be Back, but Ben makes a lot of good points. And that actually, one of the things that was a standout for me was the performance of King George. I just loved that, like the whole like sassy and ridiculousness of of King George. And yeah, you're right. By the time like the last bit that he did, like he was actually like on the sidelines, like dancing around and like getting into it, which is a weird like kind of meta thing where like in actual history, in actual reality, not just a portrayal of it, you had England and the relationship that England had with the American colonies, then becoming America, then over time, how that relationship has grown and changed. And in many ways with like all of the culture that America exports, including Broadway musicals, there's a lot of the like American culture that can affect culture in UK. And so I think that's kind of fitting that like you had King George like dancing along to the like political battles of America, almost like it's a reality show kind of a thing, where he's like, oh, they're going to tear each other apart and all this stuff, So I thought that was kind of amusing. So yeah, anyway, my picks, The Room Where It Happens was really good. And there was a lot of things about that I thought was interesting. And the fact that was more of like, that's kind of more like a jazz number than like a hip hop thing. So it was a little different. And I thought that was cool. And it's like
any Broadway musical that necessitates someone playing a banjo is a win, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it was different without feeling out of place, which sometimes can be hard to pull off. And I feel like the group choreography really shined on that one, and a lot of the like the blocking and how they did stuff. And I agree with what Ben said, where there are certain tracks where I could totally see where it can be, you can get more out of it when you watch the filmed version, where you get different camera angles and it knows what to like emphasize and stuff, than just like viewing it in at a particular showing in person. Of course, obviously it also depends on how good your seats are as well, and where what angle you're at. So yeah, I thought that was cool. And it was an interesting piece as well, because it touches on the whole like the whole theme of history as it's told and as you learn it, and then what actually happened, and then what aspects of it, even amongst the people that were living that history. There's so many aspects of like these important like events and negotiations and wars and whatever it is, where people think they know what's going on, but if they're not directly involved, they're ultimately just taking other people's word for it. You just don't know some of the specifics.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of cool, both just the fun, like, performative aspects and the deeper aspects of it that kind of blended well, which of course is a theme for the whole, show.
Right.
Let's see, aside from that, I think my shot was really good, and I think it
Yes.
helped establish tone very well. And I feel like it also had just great callback fodder for a lot of other bits and pieces and beats and other songs, where it kind of helped like get the whole rhythm of the show. So I feel like the show as a whole owes kind of a debt to that track, because without it, a lot of the other stuff doesn't work as well. And it's just a fun, it's just a fun track with cool choreography in general. So yeah, those are my big two that stand out, I think.
I had the shot glass with that on it.
Very nice. Kevin, I believe it is your turn.
Yeah, I'm a long-time Hamill fan, so I've had many years to ruminate on my favorite songs, and it comes down to two of my favorite performances on there, which are I'm blanking on it. Wait for It by Leslie Odom Jr., who is my favorite male vocalist on the cast. But just that
Fair.
song, it paints. I mean, it gives Burr a very sympathetic outlook that I think is necessary. I mean, Burr was. I mean, as he was a person, and as much as he's as he says in the end, the villain in our histories. I mean, he had his own wants, desires, and whatnot. He loved his family, and that kind of put a sympathetic spin on his character, in my opinion. And my other favorite song is "One Last Time" by Christopher Jackson and Lynn Manuel-Miranda, just because it's, I don't know, so I don't know, just it's so powerful. I love Christopher Jackson in that role, but it's such a powerful farewell to Washington. And when they use his own words at the end, to this day, and I've listened to this album hundreds of times. I've seen it live twice. I've watched a bootleg version of it dozens of times, and I still tear up every single time when they start reading his actual words.
From his actual farewell address.
Yes.
It
I
is.
also love the King George reaction to that too in the later track, where he's like,
Right.
voluntarily gave up his power. You can do that?
Yeah, no, just when he's like walking out, like dumbfounded at looking at Washington, and Washington has this like very stately, walk out, and then King George is like, "What the?"
Right. Well, and all of Washington's raps are very measured, like Washington himself.
Yeah, he's very metered.
Mhm.
Well, and something I was pointed out was that the more relaxed he is, the more he sings.
Mhm.
So at the very beginning, it's everything that Washington does is a rap, and by the time you get to One Last Time, he is just singing because he is at peace finally, and he's relaxed, and he's no longer fighting for the country that he helped found, and he's just going off to rest.
Finally get to retire.
Yes.
Right. So one of my favorite interactions between Washington and Hamilton is when he's asking him to be the treasury. It's like Treasury of State. I understand this will be a Treasury of State.
Yeah, no, just answer the question, George. Treasury or state, man.
He's like, Secretary of the Treasury. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. Becca.
Yes, now that all the good ones have been taken.
Well, I mean, you can easily just agree with people, because that's mostly what I'm going to do. So.
Fair enough. I am a sucker for the cabinet battle.
Which one? Both, one or two, or both?
The first one, because it gives one of my favorite lines in the whole show. Well, it inspires one of my favorite lines in the whole show. Is I'll see if I can get it right. They don't. Oh God. Okay. They don't have a plan. They just hate mine. Like, that line just kills me. And Cabinet Battle sets that up. I also, of course, absolutely love Satisfied and Helpless, just because I am a weird kid and I like the emotional trauma that is set up there. Also, Philip Hilton's final song. Oh my God, it kills me just because of the drum beat in the back that's happening.
Yeah.
And it just stops while they're singing, and it kills me every time. You want to talk about crying?
It's an unfortunate way to describe it. It kills you.
I ugly cry. Like, not even like a Liv
Right.
Tyler in Lord of the Rings, this pretty sexy cry. No, I'm talking ugly cry. But I also, there's really no song I don't like.
Yeah.
Like, I even love oh god, the one right before King George's first song where they're debating with Samuel Seabury.
Is that Farmer Refuted?
Yes,
Yes.
because I
Well,
love the pace of it. I also
I
absolutely
love the line "Don't modulate the key and
do
then
not
refuse
debate with
and
me.
not debate with me," because music, quick brief music geek thing. That's exactly what, like, it goes up a semitone, so it changes keys right before that happens.
It's awesome. I also absolutely love all the different callbacks to various musicals,
Mhm.
like the modern Major General,
Yep.
which obviously is from Pirates of Penzance. Nobody
Mhm.
Needs to Know, which is from the last 5 years. It's an homage to
Mhm.
that. And then you have Sit Down, John, You Fat Mother, which is an
Which is from
homage to
1776.
1776.
Yes.
Apparently, there's a
Which
whole rap
we
Yeah,
that he had.
10 Dual Commandments is just a straight biting of the 10 Crack Commandments by Biggie Smalls.
Oh yeah, true. I actually watched a thing where they were talking about like when they was doing the first one, the not throwing away my shot or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
Mulligan, Lafayette, and Lawrence are all based on like '90s rappers, their style,
Mhm.
and then '80s, like late '80s, early '90s, and
Yeah,
then Hamilton's based on like more complicated rap that came in like the late '90s, early 2000s.
yeah.
So it's supposed to
Because
be
they're
this
all
same
doing very
quality.
basic, old school, I am, my name is X and the place to be, which is like it was cliche in the 90s, and then Hamilton shows up with this multisyllabic rhyme
Syllabic.
scheme, and yeah, syllabic, whatever. You say potato, I say pimp.
I say tater.
Um, so yeah, I agree with pretty much everyone. Of like for a while, so up on my fifth and sixth rewatch of the musical, because I don't have anything better to do with my time. And my opinions have evolved. Satisfied was my first kind of go-to track. And then a track that I absolutely adore that no one else has mentioned yet is Guns and Ships. I just love
I was about
how
to say,
David Diggs just goes insane on that track.
So
yeah, I was hoping
Rap,
someone would bring that one up because it's
yeah,
so.
he hits 204 words per minute while also doing a semi-passable French accent.
Becca was going to
fun
say something.
weird story. The first live performance I ever saw of that song was not by Debbie Diggs. It was by my baby sister, who was drunk as a skunk, and she got every word right.
That is impressive. I couldn't do that, and like I listened to that 2 or 3 times a day. Um, I also agree with Kevin that Wait for It really sells Burr as a character, which is so important because he's not the antagonist really. Like he's the end antagonist, but he is a through line. He's really more sort of a co-protagonist, in my
So,
opinion.
have you heard the song that was cut from the production called Congratulations?
Yes,
So, Congratulations kind of points out that the real antagonist to
is Hamilton himself.
Hamilton
Yeah,
is Alexander Hamilton.
that's always
Yeah.
the way I interpreted it. Yeah, I agree with
Mhm.
what you said, Neil. Like Burr, like, again, it's one of those things where it's like if you got a frenemy thing going on, and
Mhm.
like he kind of helps him like get his start and understand things in a sense, and then they become rivals, and obviously it comes to a head with the election and everything. But yeah, ultimately, like I just viewed him as another protagonist, and that Alexander Hamilton's own flaws were the real antagonist
Yeah.
of the story, if there's a single antagonist.
Yeah,
See,
but
Burr was kind of the counterpoint to Hamilton. Because Hamilton, he was almost like Hamilton's foil. Because everything Burr wanted to do, Hamilton got.
Yep.
Which is what makes the but the duel between Burr and Hamilton so brilliant, because for once Burr actually takes his shot and doesn't wait for it, and Hamilton waits.
Yep.
Sweet irony.
Or away a shot, actually.
Yeah, he threw away his shot.
Yeah.
And the thing about that, I love the lead up to it, the letters between the two of them. I remain your obedient servant.
I have the honor to be your obedient servant. A.M. I do have one final thing to say here before we go on. But that is, if I were auditioning for this show, I would totally want to be Washington, because he has the most of my favorite songs that gets to be sung. It used to be like Washington or Burr would be either one would be the ones I'd really want to do. Although I kind of top out at the top end of Dear Theodosia. So
I'm gonna make a prediction that in the next 2 to 3 years, Theodosia is going to become a very common name that people will be naming their babies.
it's possible. It's a good name. I like it. I'll take that over other names that I could mention, but will probably piss off half of our fan base, all three of them.
It sounds like a prescription medication or a tropical drink. Theodosia.
Yeah.
Theodosia with a twist.
Theodosia on the rocks.
So what I find interesting, because I was looking up a little bit of history on Aaron Burr, is that when he got divorced from his wife, her divorce attorney was Alexander Hamilton Jr.
Wow, that's really weird.
That's who she hired.
Was this before or after the duel?
So Alexander Hamilton Jr. is his younger son, and since Philip died when he was 19, I'm gonna say later.
Oh, that is hilarious.
But the other part that's really interesting about Hamilton is the concept of you have no control who tells your history. And I'm going to present that nowhere is this more clear than in the fact that if you compare, and I'm not sure if everyone's seen this, so I'm sorry, 1776's John Adams compared to Hamilton John Adams, you get a completely different feel for that man. And Thomas Jefferson, that's an even bigger one.
Well, a lot of that is that's all in the way that Chernow wrote about them.
That's what I mean.
Chernow was not a fan of, I don't think, of either man in general, but writing from Hamilton's perspective as well, I mean, very much highlighted the flaws of both men in the biography.
Yeah, I haven't read the biography, so I'd have to take your word for that there. But
well, there's also the fact that Aaron Burr actually stood more against slavery openly than Alexander Hamilton. During their lives.
No, he owned slavery. Aaron Burr owned slaves up until the day he died and didn't release them. He handed his slaves on to his daughter in his will.
I was reading about someone else. I apologize.
But Hamilton he wasn't a staunch abolitionist, but he was an abolitionist. He briefly, I mean, he may have. I mean, there's some conjecture whether he actually owned them as slaves or not. But he had servants, and he did at one point facilitate a transaction regarding slavery. But he was pretty hands-off on slavery. Now, he wasn't, as ardent abolitionist as John Adams, who had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Wanted nothing to do with it whatsoever.
It should be pointed out that historically, in 1784, Burr did actually propose the abolition of slavery as a New York State assemblyman.
Right, but he still then owned slaves and did not do the right thing and manumit them. If he was really against slavery, he would not have continued to own them, even keeping them in bondage after his death. So I will argue that he was not a abolitionist in any sense other than that one proposition. However, back on Hamilton, he he was fairly against it, but again, not a focus of his life. But Eliza, after his death, went on to do a lot of abolitionist work that was based on viewpoints that Hamilton had.
Yeah. Hamilton definitely wasn't John Lawrence.
No.
Uh,
But he would never have taken part in the slave trade that much because of how he was raised.
Yeah.
I mean, having been raised amongst the Caribbean slave trade, he could have never been a part of that.
Right. And Hamilton, even after all that, he still was active in ending the legality of international slave trade. So I mean, he did work towards it. Like you said, he wasn't like a staunch abolitionist.
I mean, he was an abolitionist. It just was never a focus, which is also why it's not a focus in the play. He never made a huge part of it, which, I mean, people can argue that it's a flaw in his character, but it was just never his forefront, the forefront of any of his efforts.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's
sorry to jump on you on that, Becca, but
That's fine. I still hold the point that he did more to abolish slavery than George Washington did.
Oh, well, George Washington his record on slavery was as bad as Jefferson's, almost as bad.
Yeah.
If you watch this show, they almost elevate him to a saint.
Right, which is we all tend to do that. I mean, American history has tended to do that. Not all of us, but collectively as Americans, we have tended to do that.
Yeah.
Which goes back to my original
history
point
in general.
You can't control who actually tells your story.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think part of the point with that was that they mentioned that Hamilton didn't have, like, everyone else got to kind of control the narrative of their lives as they got older, whereas Hamilton died and his detractors got to trash him for years. And
it didn't help that he also trashed himself in
but
one
like,
of the stupidest public image moves I've really ever seen.
Right. But he never got to, like, later on, he never got to be part of that discussion of his own legacy.
Yeah.
As the nation grew and became stronger. I've got Hamilton playing in the background, and I'm on one last time, and they're getting to that point, and I'm, getting a little misty over here.
It's a fantastic piece.
That's one of the recurring themes throughout the throughout the show is priorities and political maneuvering, because you have these debates about how you, like, what you agree to and what's worth compromising and all this stuff in order to have a country in the first place. So you see a lot of back and forth and some of that, and then of course there's the whole there's the whole concept of, like, honor and obligations and stuff, like when you have I think it was at the cabinet battle. Was that cabinet battle 2 when they were talking about whether they should involve themselves in the war between the French and the English?
That's 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say I had a thought, but the song drove it out of my head.
At least it's not picking up on the audio, so that we don't have to worry about Disney.
I was watching my on Discord. I was watching my ring to see if it was lighting up at all, and it's not picking up at all.
Yeah. That's why I wear headphones.
I also have a headset on, so
yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm just sitting here in the middle of the room with a phone.
On speakerphone, no less.
Right. Well, otherwise I can't hear you. Interesting thing though, Burr's later life is filled with quasi treason and just it's just like reading more about Burr. I was just like, dude, no wonder you ended up playing second fiddle to Hamilton.
Yeah. Burr led an interesting life. I am reminded of what Alec Hardison says of him in Leverage. It's like, this is the most unstable politician that we've seen in American politics since Aaron Burr. And Burr shot a guy.
The whole duel thing was, that was like a recurring thing though. So it's not like that was some unique thing,
Yeah, no, duels were just a thing back then, but
illegal, even in New Jersey, but still a thing.
Yeah,
everything's legal in Jersey.
To be fair, though, most disputes die. No one shoots.
It's actually funny how many the duels that Angelica's husband fought. John Church. He actually had a duel with Aaron Burr and shot one of Aaron Burr's buttons off But that was all the damage that came of it. Like he missed otherwise.
Speaking of duels, I am reminded of one of my favorite, almost definitely apocryphal quotes of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was, according to this legend, Lincoln was challenged to a duel, and as the challengee, he was given, he gets to choose the battlefield and the weapons. So he was, sir, I challenge you to a duel. Name the place and equipment. And his response was sledgehammers and 6 feet of water. Because Lincoln was 6'8" and did log splitting in his 20s.
Yeah.
Which it's almost definitely apocryphal, but it's a very fun little story.
Right.
And we lost Becca, and now she's back. Hooray!
Back in.
Say, glad at least it's not me.
For a change.
Right.
So
Yes.
I don't know. My brain stopped.
Becca is transmitting, but I'm not hearing anything.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, you were. You were
I'm sorry.
transmitting silence. You were
I
listening to the sound of silence from you.
so you have no idea. Your little anecdote about he got to choose the weapons and the place, and
Mhm.
then I guess I cut out because there was nothing. I was just sitting there in anticipation, waiting for the rest of the story, going, "Oh,
Okay.
come on, Neil.
Well,
You
I
know
will
this
I
story."
will repeat the story, and everybody listening to the podcast will hate you, Becca.
No, you don't have to, please. It's okay. You can tell me
Sledgehammer,
later,
6
I
feet of water.
swear.
Yeah, it was sledgehammers and 6 feet of water.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I
which
learned
is
some
funny to me.
some trivia this weekend about Hamilton, especially some of the like behind the scenes. Daveed Diggs is actually, I don't know if they're actually in a relationship or they're just really good friends, but one of the ensemble cast members. She is the one with like she's black and she has like the blonde
The
like
blood?
the blonde poof on the top of her head, on the front of her head. She plays in some. She's like the one that whispers to King George about John Adams.
Yeah, she's the bullet.
Ariana DeBois.
Yes,
DeBois?
she after she is killed. She's also the rebel that's killed in
Mm-hmm.
before.
She dies like 3 times on stage.
Yes, but she plays death in the rest of the. She is death in the rest of the. That's one of the themes. She's always
Her
like
name.
the bullet, and like she carries the bullet to Hamilton twice actually.
Mhm.
One that it misses that goes over his head, but then another, the one that strikes him. She
Yep.
plays death, but she's also in the Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, she
Ariana
plays the rumor.
DeBois.
Yes. She plays what's the actual character's name?
The rumor,
Allison.
I
She
can't
plays
remember.
Allison Hargreaves.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
Number
she's
2.
been
Emmy Raver
Not number 2, number 3.
she's been her and Daveed Diggs have been, I guess, good friends or an item for a while. That was something I learned the other day, and as well as the fact that she is themed as death throughout most of the show.
According to Wikipedia, they've been in a relationship.
That was all my little trivia that I had there at the moment.
I like Daveed Diggs. I find him sometimes on TikTok, and he has the best videos.
Diggs is great. I saw a really fun interview with him with Colbert. He was on Colbert's show, and Colbert was talking about how, man, it's really amazing because Colbert had apparently just seen Hamilton, and it's like, you really get the emotion about it, and Diggs is like, yeah, I guess, and Colbert was like, really, you don't feel that? And it's like, well, I mean, you haven't been in it 500 times now. Which is really true. Like it is hard to keep the energy going for long periods of time.
Yeah.
It's like I go out, I do my role, I come back in.
Yeah. After a certain point, you do start to go, okay, it's a job.
Yeah.
Or you have a mental breakdown. Either way.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Can imagine.
You Bob Hoskins. Nothing. I'm being a dork.
Well, that's what that's what this is all about.
So supposedly Bob Hoskins, when he's doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, started seeing hallucinations because he got a little bit too into the character.
I heard that too. I just had to pick that up
I
immediately.
want that to be true, so I'm going to choose to believe that that's true.
It has now
Remind
become.
me-
That's why he wasn't in any movies for a while after he did it.
You remind me of the time that I hallucinated. It was during a move, and I had been up for about 40 hours at that point because I put everything off until the second to last day until the day before I had to turn in my keys at the old apartment. And on the last run of stuff to the new place, which was happening at about 4 in the morning, I was kind of nodding off at the wheel, which was not safe. Luckily, there was no one else on the road because it was 4 o'clock in the morning. But I kept seeing 6-foot tall, light blue animated penguins that were trying to jump in front of my car. This is a true story.
Thanks,
And
Mario 64.
To which I said, I am so very, very thankful this is my last run, because if it weren't, I think I'd probably crash my car and die. Technically, it was my second to last run, but because I still had to go back and turn in the keys at 8 a.m. But what I did was I went back to the old apartment and took a 3-hour nap in my car and felt much better afterwards.
I went and found the story behind Bob Hoskins on Who Framed Roger Rabbit and
Yep.
popped it in the chat for you guys if you want to peruse that later. Apparently, it was because he was always alone on stage because that was before green screen and CGI and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So he was really hardcore method acting, being with a bunch of cartoons, and it really messed him up.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right then.
So you can not only choose to believe it's correct because it was apparently actually correct.
I just love the juxtaposition of hardcore method acting with cartoons.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, moving on because this is a rabbit hole, no pun
Yes.
intended. But
We've
But
gone
changed.
way off track.
Yeah.
And I'm watching King George dance and drop it like it's hot.
Make it rain too.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was great.
So I just want to say that this is something that's bugged me for a long time.
Okay.
That is not how you spell Skylar, in my opinion.
You're not Dutch.
It's a Dutch spelling.
I know I'm not Dutch, but it bothers the hell out of me.
I mean, it
what
still
bothers
works.
you.
I mean, phonetically, it still even works.
Yeah, it just bothers me. Also, I love how Peggy gets to be Maria Reynolds, so like every Skylar sister has eyes for Alexander Hamilton.
Uh-huh. Which, can we talk about how great a performance that was by Jasmine Cephas-Jones in that one song? I mean,
Yeah.
she's very nasally and whatnot as Peggy, but then she comes out and delivers this absolutely knockout, steamy performance as, I'm blanking on her name, the
Maria
character's name,
Reynolds.
Mariah Reynolds.
Maria Reynolds.
Yeah, no, that was a knockout performance on her part.
I think Renee Goldsberry wins at female performers in this show as
That's one
Angelica
opinion.
Schuyler. Yes, Eliza is good, but I do love me some Angelica.
I think Philippa Sue is the better vocalist, but I can see how you would say that it's a better performance overall as Angelica.
Angelica gets better songs, which helps.
That's true. Some of Eliza's songs, at least for me in the beginning, came off as a little annoying.
I want to just as an aside, I want to point out I love that bit where Eliza got to beatbox for Philip.
Yes.
That was great.
Yeah, that is excellent. that made my so I watched this the third time with my mom and my dad, and that got a chuckle out of both of them. Also, my dad really enjoyed the show, which he didn't think he was going to, because he doesn't particularly like hip hop, or at least he doesn't think he likes hip hop. I'm pretty sure really he doesn't have an idea of what good hip hop sounds like.
Probably doesn't have experience with hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, I would have said the same thing up through about my junior year of college when I discovered a few underground people who I just realized were just fantastically masterful, like MF Doom.
I think it's that way with a lot of musical genres, where it's like you think you don't like an entire genre, but really it's like a particular era of the genre, or like the popular contemporary artists of that genre. Like, I feel like to take another vastly almost polar opposite kind of thing, country music is very much that way.
I can't stand bro country.
I couldn't stand country music for the most part growing up. But then as I got older, it's still not one of my like favorite genres. It's still pretty low on the totem pole, but I like the genre a lot more than I used to when I was younger. And there's a lot more like individual artists or bands I can point to that I'm like, this is a good example of it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I'm the same way. I can think of many very good country music artists. None of them get played on the radio, though.
Of course, when
Yeah,
your parents annoy you with certain stuff, you're going to reflexively not
Yeah.
like it. And then
Yeah.
later on, you might come around and be like, this is actually good. I just couldn't appreciate the time because my annoying mom or dad was, blasting it at me. like I think Garth Brooks is a legitimately good artist, but I was a young kid having my mom like blast Garth Brooks while I was a hostage in the car, and I was like, no bueno.
Yeah.
Merle Haggard, George Strait, and what was the other one that I can't stand?
You can't stand George Strait?
No, but not George. Alan Jackson.
Yeah.
Oh, and Randy Travis.
Yeah, I can see your disdain for Randy Travis.
To speak to Neil's point real quick as well, I think this is a great thing to, if you have someone who thinks that they don't like hip hop or rap or whatever, like categorically, if they watch this, they might change their mind a bit, because I feel like
Awesome.
there's a lot of like the core of like actually good like quality hip hop and rap comes from poetry, and this is like poetry,
Yeah. As I say,
Also, this one goes into a lot of, but I don't like musicals. I hate people that are like, but I don't like musicals. Like, one of my favorite movies in general is a musical. It is a very non-standard musical that I have had so many people just reject because it's an opera.
Is it Repo?
It's Repo.
Repo's great.
Repo's amazing. It's another
How
one
did
of
I know it was
these-
going to be Repo?
because you've met me. So Hamilton bridges this other gap that we have in people that do not give musical theater a chance.
And it's just like it's just so good.
well, Hamilton does something for me as a history major too. It humanizes history so much.
Yeah.
I mean,
Words on paper anymore.
Yeah.
It's not just dry words on paper anymore.
Exactly. Alexander Hamilton created a national banking system. No, it was so more than that.
He's
Right,
the
yeah,
man
no.
who was in the room where it happened.
And like you kind of think of hyperbole in the film in the thing, but like had he not done what he did, like America probably wouldn't have survived financially as a country. Like it would have broken up and devolved back into regions or states, that would have been easily picked off again by the British.
In
But-
1812.
Well, probably even before that. They probably would have struck before that if the country had dissolved. But I mean, it's a dry subject, like Ben was talking about, but it was a very important thing that he did.
Well, and I think another. Go ahead, Becca.
So, didn't do the in-depth research, basically just kind of fiddling around. Have you heard any of the stuff that Hamilton proposed in the talked for 6 hours?
Oh gosh, yes, it was. That was a little. That was covered in the biography a bit, and it's come on, man.
Like he basically proposed having a royalty system
Now,
at one point.
and Chernow explains why he does that. Kind of goes into this, like the psychology of his life, but coming out of the Revolutionary War, it's like, what the crap are you talking about, man? Sorry, I keep talking over you, Becca.
I'm just gonna cry in the corner.
Did it again.
Well, something that doesn't actually come up in the play, but is a somewhat well-known historical fact, at least I hope it is, for everyone's sake, is that when George Washington was, when he was about to become president in the early stages, there were a lot of people that were like, oh yeah, he should totally be the king of America. People were like, oh yeah, George Washington is so great and the perfect leader. He should be our king. And
there were
like,
moves to King George Washington, and
he was like, guys, what the fuck? We just fought a whole war over this shit. Like, what's wrong with you? No, I'm not. I will never be anyone's king. Like, stop it. And that was, I'm sure that was a contributing factor to why he was so, he felt so strongly about stepping down and not, just going term after term, because he was so popular and successful.
Yeah, no,
he could have been the president for a very long time. You have to remember as well.
If he had run again, he definitely would have won in another landslide.
This was long before term limits for presidency was a thing. That
Thank
wasn't
you,
until the modern era.
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt?
Franklin Delano.
He was the one that got that put in place because he.
Mhm.
I'm
Sorry.
aware of the 20th Amendment, the lame duck amendment that was passed. I've never heard it pronounced Roosevelt.
Well, it was in response to him, not that he did it.
Yeah, no, it was because he was elected for 4 terms in office.
Wait, was that a play on words like a ruse? Roosevelt? That I don't.
Or are you just complaining about the way I pronounce his last name?
Yes, I'm not questioning the history. I know the history.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Jeez.
Misunderstood. Apologies.
You go to the corner and cry. It's
I
your
refuse.
turn.
I will later, but not because of this.
It's because George Washington stepped down.
Speaking of Washington, I kind of feel like he was kind of the middle ground between how Hamilton was and how Burr was, where Hamilton was like, I'm super ambitious. I'm gonna say all this stuff and just kind of run my mouth, even though I should maybe be a little more circumspect at certain times. And then Burr was like, oh, I'm just gonna hedge back and not really, stand for anything. I'm just gonna do the politically opportune thing at almost every juncture. Whereas like Washington, like was bold when he needed to be, but was also like wise enough to keep his mouth shut when he needed to. Like I feel like he was kind of like the middle between those extremes in some ways.
He took the best part of those two approaches. Yeah.
The moment that Hamilton just says, I'm gonna have to take a lesson from you, talk less, smile more, like it makes me laugh every time.
You've got to be kidding me. I'm going to amend my song selection right now, just real quick, because I'm going to have to add one to it because it kind of slipped my mind. But It's Quiet Uptown also is a bit of a tearjerker.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's also just a fantastic song.
Yeah, it's hard. Like dealing with the unimaginable is correct as far as that goes.
Mhm.
Also, for that matter, we didn't mention Hurricane, which is like
Yes.
also a really honestly, the whole damn soundtrack's great. Everybody should see this. Everybody should see the damn show.
Right. If you haven't already.
I absolutely love all of the discussion that Hamilton has about death. I imagine death so much it feels more like memory.
Which is an actual
going to get me
thing that he wrote.
Is it like a beat without a melody? That line right there, and then the song as he's being shot having absolutely no instrumentals.
Mm-hmm.
That death is in fact a beat without a melody.
Yes, good point.
Like I love that.
Like yeah. And by the way, like one thing I will say to anyone who's listening and saying, well, I don't have Disney Plus. 1, Disney Plus is pretty cheap, and 2, it's out on Disney Plus, which means it's out on the internet at this point. If you know where to look.
Yeah. And it will not be a bootleg version like I had.
Yeah, Disney would shut that shit down pretty quick, but once it's on the internet, it never really goes away.
Well, there's a trial for Disney Plus, but does it let you watch Hamilton on the trial?
No, it does not.
Okay, see, that's an important thing to note.
You do have to have a paid copy of Disney Plus.
1 month. Yeah.
I mean, it's probably worth it for a month just to binge some of the great stuff on there, like The Mandalorian.
It's $8 and you can binge The Mandalorian and DuckTales 2017 and
oh yeah, absolutely.
And Hamilton and The Incredibles and the 90s Spider-Man and X-Men cartoons.
Big Hero 6.
Yeah,
good stuff.
All the Marvel movies, if you want to sit down for I think it's 43 hours. With the exception of the 2 Sony Spider-Man movies, because Sony.
Wait, the 2? Don't you mean the 3?
2.
Oh, wait a minute. There wasn't a
the
third.
The two ones that are actually part of MCU. That are actually part of the MCU. Far From Homecoming. Those are not available for streaming on Disney Plus because Sony. Yes, the Tom Holland ones.
That was confusing because the original 3 movies were Sony movies.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was thinking
they're all Sony movies.
Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, all the standalone ones are technically Sony movies. They just have the deal that they made for the latter ones, right?
Because Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man.
So since we're talking about Spider-Man, are we going to talk about the failed musical?
Turn off
the dark.
That's one of my favorite punchlines ever. I love throwing out a turn off the dark reference just to see who gets it.
I would love to do an episode on Turn Off the Dark, but we only have like 10 minutes left, so I'll
We could do
put
an
that on the
episode
list.
on failed stuff in general, and that could be one of the things.
Oh God, nerd things that had potential but then didn't.
Yeah, failed nerddom.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm keen on a Spider-Man musical necessarily having potential in the first place, but
That's so true.
It had
It
more
was
potential
so-
than the Shrek
It's like
musical.
Punisher, the musical.
It had so many problems. It went so far over budget. Spider-Man broke his leg twice during rehearsal.
What? Neil, you are a theater. What is the musical that's on roller skates? Is it Starlight Express?
It's Starlight Express, yes.
Okay. That one also had a huge injury problem.
Yeah. It's because it's on roller skates.
On
who would
roller
have thunk?
skates on ramps above the audience.
Starlight Express, by the way, is a fantastic show. If you really want to, if you want to know kind of what it's like to be on
Acid.
well, I wouldn't say acid. It's not really an. I'd say probably more like shrooms.
Some sort of hallucinogen.
Yeah.
There's not much difference.
Something where you ask yourself, what is even happening right now? It's also got some good songs. If you like trains, I like trains.
I do.
So we got 9 to 10 minutes left, plus however much we would like to fill our hour and 30 minutes that I shoot for. We got about 10 minutes left. Do we want to talk about the gasp?
Oh, yes.
Oh, at the very end.
Yeah. So there's theories. What's our favorite gasp theory?
She died
Lynn
in.
Manuel-Miranda showing Eliza Hamilton how everyone actually came to listen to Hamilton's story.
That's my favorite theory too. Yeah.
Now, what is this?
So at the very end of Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, right before the blackout, Eliza gasps. And it is a matter of hot debate as to why is she gasping.
Now, I hadn't actually thought about that, that Becca said, but I don't usually frequent like Reddit or anything like that, where you might see said theories. I'd always thought, that she had that was her dying and seeing Hamilton again.
That is another prevalent theory.
That's a good one that Becca had pointed out.
Yeah, the one that and I agree. I agree that that's my favorite theory is that for just a moment, Eliza gets to see past the fourth wall and realize that the story is being told.
Yes, because that's the whole thing about Lynn Manuel-Miranda showing up on stage after Hamilton has died, and he always has his back to the audience at that point because he's not actually part of it. That's why he crosses stage-wise or something like that. Because you're never supposed to turn your back to the audience, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, mostly.
So there are a lot of theories on that, but Philippa Sue doesn't even know why she did it.
Yeah, that's the best part.
It wasn't even like part of the show.
So her quote is, "I would not be able to tell you what I was thinking in that precise moment when that shot was taken. That was in my brain."
But was it like a written part of it? Was it written into the show,
or
was it something that like happened the first time and they're like, oh yeah, let's keep that?
I don't know. I'm trying to do some.
I'm just trying to see.
And truth be told, Lynn Manuel-Miranda doesn't put
It
it.
was not in the original script.
Was not.
But it's part of the show now because everybody does it.
Well, and it was on the soundtrack, I do believe.
Yeah.
Not everything was like the scream at the end of Stay Alive, the reprise where Philip dies. That wasn't on the soundtrack.
No. Although I do want to give a shout out to the horrible mistake that they made in deciding to take out the line Southern motherfucking Democratic Republicans.
Yeah, especially since they could have gotten away with one F-bomb, and apparently they thought, was too much.
Well, that one's always been there. Like even in the soundtrack.
Right? Yeah.
That
No,
one's
they,
there.
they never said the F word there.
Yeah, even in the edited sound, even in the edited, like without the parental advisory sticker soundtrack, it's there. But for some reason, they did in fact break out both of the fucks,
Yes.
which I agree. Southern Democratic
Southern motherfucking
motherfucking,
Democratic
yeah,
Republicans.
whatever the order is the better fuck to have in there.
It feels like it flows better that way.
Mm-hmm.
It does, and it just drives such a great punch.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Although I
just
also
to-
like Hercules Mulligan. If you knock me down, I get the fuck back up again. Like either of those would
That's
have
fair.
been a worthy inclusion.
I feel the Southern Democratic Republicans line deserves it better because it is, first of all, just so iconic, and second of all, is such it's such a character development.
Yeah,
Honestly,
I'm not
Aaron
disagreeing
Burr
with you.
becoming cocky as fuck.
Yeah. I am not disagreeing with you at all.
I have another
do-
random aside
yeah.
I want to get
Sure.
to before I forget as
Fire
we're
away.
wrapping up here. Did the performance? I only know a few of the actor names because I just watched it the other day
Mhm.
and just the one time. But the performance of
Scrub.
Thomas Jefferson, does that
Mhm.
remind you of Cat Williams at all? I totally
Yes.
got a Cat Williams, the comedian vibe from
When
that.
he's like got the cane and he's like walking like that.
Yeah, like how he's dressed, how he like his
Yes.
mannerisms, the way like a lot of the stuff how he like moved and sung or whatever. Like I was getting a very Cat Williams vibe.
You know,
Just
I
immediately.
couldn't have put a word to that before you said that, but that is exactly how I have like thought the vibe I got from that song.
Anyone
Must
who's
be
not
part of
familiar,
why I
throw on a
hate
Cat Williams special. It'll take you
Jefferson
about a
so
minute
much.
to find out what I'm talking about.
I can't. I cannot stand Cat Williams's humor
Yeah, I
at
don't.
all.
I mean, I don't. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, like it bothers me on a visceral level. I just don't find him funny.
I actually find him actively unfunny, kind of like
It's
Jeff
one of those
Dunham.
grading things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can.
Like-
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. Anyway, digressions.
Oh, I said that mostly because I thought I would start another fight with Becca.
Nah.
Uh,
I don't see many people that are lukewarm about Jeff Dunham. It always seems like they either love him or hate him.
He's a very much love or hate comedian, and I'm definitely in the hate camp.
I'm pretty much lukewarm about him, so
I'm very
I'll jump in the
lukewarm
lukewarm
about
category.
Jeff Dunham. I could take him or leave him.
Ahmed the Dead Terrorist is pretty funny, but it's his only funny character, in my opinion.
Peanut's my favorite of his.
Well, you know, Ben, our friendship has had a good run.
And it will continue.
Any final thoughts we want to throw out there? I think we're kind of out of stuff to say, unless somebody has something else they want to bring up. I'm out of topics to broach.
I think there's plenty to talk about, but not in like a few minutes. So
Yeah.
I think we're out of
Mhm.
Yeah.
really usable time.
My final thought on this,
Brain juice.
great. Something I went with. I like Hamilton because it makes history approachable.
Mhm.
And it's not just, it doesn't come off just as, it's a interpretation of history that we don't get. It's like, and in 1770, it's not passionate. It's what history is really about. It's a human story.
Mhm. A 1776 was not a boring story, as Becca and I can tell you. It was a good musical.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that as far as like historical accuracy goes, I wouldn't go into it expecting like good details. It's got the highlights pretty well, but as far as like individual details, almost none of them are correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's not so much that it hits the broad strokes,
Right.
and it tells the story.
Right.
Of,
it does what it's supposed to do. It was never intended to be a historically accurate thing.
Yeah.
Lynn Manuel-Miranda and Ron Chernow went back and forth about that before it was anything was ever written. But it was always meant to be like a compressed story. You can't tell 40 years of someone's life accurately in 3 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't.
It has been doing a very good thing in that it is reinvigorating interest in early American history.
Yes.
Like, because like my dad was like, I bet most of that was inaccurate, but I'd kind of like to maybe read a biography of Hamilton now.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have looked up some of the letters between Angelica Schuyler and Hamilton. They're interesting. It takes a long time to read them because they're in super fancy cursive, but they're quite interesting.
And also, they use their vocabulary is much different than ours.
Well, you're talking about historical accuracy versus like the presentation and format and all that. It reminds me of Lord of the Rings. Like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's not there or is different compared to the books, but like, my God, you would never be able to pull that off if you had
No.
to be 100% faithful to the books. Like,
No, you
it
wouldn't.
just
Oh, yeah.
wouldn't have happened. And of course, much like people becoming more, like this being a spark for people's interest in early American history and some of the individual founding fathers and so on and so forth. The Lord of the Rings did much the same thing, where not like it exactly needed a press agent. It's the fucking Lord of the Rings, but for a new generation of people that may not have read the books or read all of them, that was the spark that got them to read the books.
Yep.
No,
Now
I mean-
everyone's read the Silmarillion, right?
My comment was never meant to be like, oh yeah, no, that was never meant to be a knock on the show. But some people are entirely too pedantic for their own good, and that was just kind of a disclaimer to don't go into it expecting it to be
Right.
that way.
Right.
It is in fact entirely an interpretation and a compression of the actual story.
Well, expectations, I feel, is another thing that's important in this. Like, I felt like I went into it with the right expectations, so I didn't feel like, oh, this is totally out of the blue or whatever. Like, I didn't feel betrayed by how a particular thing happened because I knew what I was getting into.
This also breaks up the terrible trend that's going on right now of just taking early 90s movies and making them into musicals, and I appreciate it for that.
Yes, so annoying.
Wait, that's a thing? I was not
Oh my
aware.
God, there's Heathers the musical, Legally Blonde, Beetlejuice,
Oh,
Addams
right.
Family.
God, I hadn't really realized that. You're right.
Yeah. SpongeBob
Like-
the musical, which is actually apparently pretty good.
But yeah, like just the world is obsessed right now with turning old movies that weren't musicals into musicals.
And the Aladdin musical was good.
Oh, The Lion King was really good too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's from
Was
a while ago, but still, yeah, I saw that. My brother helped hook up the family with good seats there, and actually saw the Broadway show as it was meant to be seen. And holy shit, that was really good. That definitely lived
fair.
up to the hype.
Well, there's but that was like quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I made that disclaimer. I said this was
Yeah.
some time ago. This isn't the recent trend. It's just it reminded me of that because that was an early '90s movie that
My
became a
apologies.
musical that was actually really good.
But yeah, like that's kind of what musical theater is fighting right now is movies that are being translated to musicals. And that's why Hamilton is kind of a great palette wash.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings me to what I would say for my final thought on this is just the innovative nature of it, of like the whole concept, and then of course an amazing execution. You have to have both of those things. You can't really just have one. That's why it's transcended so many things, where it's become this whole cultural phenomenon. And obviously you talked about how popular it is and how many awards it won and everything, but that is just the fact that it was such a unique idea, and that it changed the game. Like, I feel like a lot of the things when it comes to a particular show or play or whatever is until someone does something that's just completely different, like no matter how good something is, there's kind of this plateau that it reaches within the art form. And so this was one of those moments where you did something completely different and did it well, and then like that can become a springboard for other people to try. It gives people like permission to do something that's totally different, because then it's like, oh, well, look at this where they did this so differently and it became this mega success. And that's my cautious optimism, is that this will breed more, creativity within that. And again, very
Hopefully.
cautious optimism, because we just talked, Becca just
Yeah.
mentioned how lately there's been a whole
Well,
lack of that, where it's like, hey,
It should be pointed out that lately Broadway has been dark since March and will continue to be dark until sometime next year.
Well, that's always just a built-in assumption, within a lot
So,
of these things.
It is my sincere hope that when Broadway reopens, we're going to see a lot of interesting stuff, because people have been able to because playwrights aren't going to stop writing plays in the middle of a pandemic. It'll take a few years probably to get things up on their feet. But I think that we have very much have a possibility for some very interesting and good theater in the next 3 or 4 years.
Well, this release on Disney Plus is also one of those things where it's like it kind of serves as a stopgap thing, where it's like, hey, this kind of renews it, puts it on the headlines and in people's brains again.
I am also very
that'd
hopeful
be
that
more.
this will set the precedent of getting video cast recordings to be more common and more regularly released. Because Broadway is such a rich person hobby. Like, yeah, I mean, sure, you want people to be able to go and see the shows, and seeing it live is different from seeing it on video, but it's still like being able to see it on video and see it with decently good production quality as opposed to a bootleg is, like that is some of the only Broadway that some people are ever going to get to see, because they live in a sea town, a sea tour town, and they just never get the shows.
Well, also that might help from a if people make shows with that in mind. I feel like that can also be helpful to the creative process and some of the diversity of what kind of show you make. If you have it with a wider audience in mind, it might help discard some of the insular elitism that can crop up in that sphere.
That's fair. And I also do not want to know how much tickets were to Hamilton. Like, don't burst my bubble. I don't want to know.
If you're going in New York, they're ridiculously expensive. But honestly, for decent seats, we paid about $200 a ticket to go see it in Chicago. Both times we went and saw it.
It isn't particularly horrible, but I should point out that last year I saw the touring show of Les Mis for $43, and that was the touring Broadway show at the time, here in Springfield.
I don't think Hamilton's coming to Springfield anytime soon, though.
Oh no, it's not coming to Springfield anytime soon. It's true.
Even if it wasn't shut down for COVID, it would not be coming to Springfield anytime soon.
We don't have enough draw. I didn't get to go and see Cats, which was a shame. I'd love to see the show version of Cats. We should talk about the movie version of Cats at some point.
I haven't seen it. I heard it's as awful as everyone expected.
I heard that was the one that makes you feel like you're on drugs just watching it.
Well, the show is like you're on drugs while you're watching it. The actual musical.
The movie, from what I have seen, which is not all of it, is like dropping acid while you have a fever.
Okay, to be fair, it is T.S. Eliot.
Yes.
This is true.
T.S. Eliot's work was never all that.
Yeah. Whereas the stage show is just like dropping acid.
I'm just putting it. I'm going to put this out there. I feel like it would be fun to watch the movie and then come back together and have an episode on that, because we did an episode with something that's really good, universally loved, and then we could do kind of the flip side where it's something fucking ridiculous.
So do that, and then everyone drop acid, watch it again, and come back and see what you think about it at the same time. Do back-to-back episodes where you do that.
I suspect it would make more sense somehow if you did.
We are out of things to talk about and time, and I have to be at work in 7 hours. So let us call it here. Everyone, thank you for listening to us ramble. Thank you, Kevin and Becca, for joining us on the show. You are welcome anytime that we're talking about something that you'd like to participate in. We will talk to all of you out there in Radio Land in 2 weeks about something else. This has been Neil,
the one true Ben,
Mike,
and
Becca.
And we will see you next time on Geek Fanthology.
All right.
This podcast is a production of Working Theory Productions. It was brought to you by the letter H and the number $10. Opening theme is Ultra Mega Hyperstorm, and ending theme is March of the Mind, both by Kevin MacLeod. If you enjoyed this podcast or know someone who would, please consider sharing it on your social media, sending us an email, leaving us a comment, liking, subscribing, following, commenting, all those things that help build the algorithm. If you really enjoyed this podcast, please consider supporting us, either with a one-time donation on our website through PayPal, or a reoccurring one at Patreon at patreon.com/workingtheory. A final thought. There's a million things we still haven't done. Just you wait. Just you wait.